Everybody, apologies for interrupting all the wonderful conversations that are happening in this lovely creative space. So good evening, everyone. I'm Hannah Millington. I'm the Honorary Secretary of the SMI, and you're very warmly welcome this evening to the Trinity Long Room Hub. Thank you for braving the cold. It's definitely turned a little bit wintry in the last couple of days, so thank you for being here. It's wonderful to see so many of you gathered here to mark the awarding of the Research Ireland Harrison Medal to Professor Philip V. Bohlman, who's here in front of me. So we're delighted to have you here this evening, Philip. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to celebrate. So you're very warmly welcome. As many of you will know, and as is sort of evident from the title, this award is a joint venture between the SMI, the Society for Musicology in Ireland, and Research Ireland, or Taija Éireann. And we extend our thanks to Research Ireland for their continued support over the last few years. So shortly we will be hearing from the president of the SMI, Professor Wolfgang Marx, and from Dr. Gráinne Walsh from Research Ireland, both of whom will formally present the award to Philip. Firstly, though, I'd like to hand you over to Professor Patrick Geoghegan, Director of the Trinity Long Room Hub, who will formally open this evening's proceedings. So welcome, Patrick.
No, good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick Geoghegan. I'm the director of the Trinity Long Room Hub. And I was going to begin by saying what the hub actually is, but I'm afraid Hannah has spoilt that with her wonderful opening, because she summed up the hub in 3 words that I think are a better 3 words than I'd be able to manage in 30 sentences. She called this place a lovely creative space. And that's really what the Trinity Long Room Hub is. The whole building is this lovely creative space where we are a research institute that sees its mission as supporting great research, supporting all of you, supporting the people across our research areas in the arts and humanities. And it's about providing opportunities to host wonderful events like this, bringing scholars together, bringing new scholars together upstairs to exchange ideas and to collaborate and work together and apply for research grants. It's to engage with the public with our events and to really show the value of the arts and humanities and how we contribute to society and how we contribute to making society a much better place. And the way this came about was a wonderful conference that was held here in the summer, organised by Nicole Grimes and the Royal Irish Academy of Music, Denise Neary there, and it was on women composers. And it posed the challenge of how come women composers aren't better known and what happened in society and in our history that excluded them and silenced them. And it was a really thought-provoking, provocative, brilliant conference. But at that conference was Professor Wolfgang Marx, who I know for many years from my other role as a presenter of Talking History on News Talk. And Wolfgang has always been such a passionate, articulate speaker about composers and about music and bring it all to life. And during that event, Wolfgang mentioned this Harrison Medal. And I just thought it was exactly the kind of event that this lovely creative space was built for, because it brings together the SMI, Research Ireland, our own music department and the School of Creative Arts here in Trinity. It brings together distinguished scholars and practitioners and the public and people interested in music to celebrate excellence and to remind us all about why the arts and humanities and why culture matters and why the creative arts matters and all that music does to challenge us, to help us better illuminate and understand the world. And so it is my great honor and pleasure and privilege to be able to say that all we are doing is hosting this wonderful ceremony and honoring a very distinguished and worthy recipient of this year's Research Ireland Harrison Medal. And just to say to all of you to thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Patrick, and apologies for stealing a bit of your speech there. So I'd now like to introduce Dr. Nicole Grimes, who's Associate Professor in the Department of Music here at Trinity.
Thank you very much, Hannah. On behalf of Trinity College Dublin, it's really a very great pleasure to join you in celebrating this year's Harrison Medal, which is awarded to Professor Philip V. Bohlman. I want to extend warmest congratulations to Professor Bohlman on this honour. His scholarship has shaped the field in profound and enduring ways, and it is a privilege for us to mark this achievement here tonight. I'd also like to congratulate Professor Wolfgang Marx, President of the Society for Musicology in Ireland, for hosting this ceremony and for the Society's continued work in fostering our scholarly community. We are deeply grateful to Professor Patrick Geoghegan, Director of the Trinity Longroom Hub, for welcoming us into this wonderful space. I also want to acknowledge our Dean of the Faculty of Creative Arts, Dean of the Faculty of Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences, Professor Carmel O'Sullivan, and the head of the School of Creative Arts, Professor Justin McGregor, and the head of the Department of Music, Dr. Richard Duckworth, and all of the Department of Music, to say a very, very warm welcome to everybody here this evening. It's lovely to bring you all into this space. My comments really are very brief, just to welcome you and say we're very much looking forward to Professor Bohlman's lecture. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. And I'd now like to hand over then to Professor Wolfgang Marx, President of SMI, as we've already heard, to read the citation for the Research Ireland Harrison Medal.
Thank you very much, Hannah, and welcome everybody. Great to see you all here. In March 2018, I was in Berlin with a group of our master's students exploring the cultural and musical highlights of that city. As part of that trip, we had arranged a visit of the collection of musical instruments and the phonogram archive, then housed in the buildings of the Ethnological Museum at the Free University in Dahlem. They have since moved on, at least the phonogram archive has. Imagine our surprise when you unexpectedly run into Philip Bohlman, who just happened to undertake some research there. He graciously interrupted his work to spend quite a bit of time with us, giving the students a chance to talk to someone in the flesh they had all read in their courses and discover that a titan in the field can also be a lovely and very approachable human being. I know that many of you already know him, but let me outline to the others what makes him such a titan. Philip Bohlman's research focuses on music and religion, music, race and colonial encounter, and music and nationalism. Jewish music history particularly, yet not only, in Central and Eastern Europe, has been a core area of his work, while he also engages with South Asia, the Middle East, cabaret, the Eurovision Song Contest, and the history of ethnomusicology. He is Ludwig Rosenberger Distinguished Service Professor at the University of Chicago, where he has taught since 1987, that is, for almost 40 years. Yet, what makes his work particularly interesting and relevant for me is his specific approach to whatever he works on. During our email exchanges in relation to planning today's event, I mentioned that to me, he always appears to be both ethnomusicologist and historical musicologist at the same time, and he fully acknowledged that. My research over many years has not been historical. My research in many places throughout the world has never not been ethnographic. This is the opening of a forthcoming chapter by Phil Bohlman that our UCD master students and I had the privilege of reading recently. It represents very well what he stands for and also why he is a perfect recipient of a medal named after Frank Llewellyn Harrison. The Dubliner Harrison started life as an organist and composer in Ireland, then continued in England as a historical musicologist, in fact a medievalist, before moving to Amsterdam, where he turned into an ethnomusicologist during the later stages of his career. Since my days as a student in Hamburg, I always found the often perceived mental gulf between historical musicology and ethnomusicology regrettable. And I feel that the term musicology is often readily yet wrongly identified with historical musicology, particularly in the English language, although sometimes the same applies to Musikwissenschaft in German too. I regard musicology as an umbrella term for all kinds of musical research, historical, ethno, popular, otherwise. They are all equally valid and relevant and can only prosper together. Hence, one of my goals during my term as president of SMI is to try and bring the different branches of musicological research on this island closer together. Harrison did that in his person, and Bohlman clearly does something very similar. In the essay quoted above, he develops the notion of what he calls the ethnohistorical moment, an approach requiring a mix of ethnological and historical ways of thinking. He often researches traditional music from a more distant past, beyond even the time of wax cylinders like those preserved in the Phonogram archive in Berlin, so that the usual ways of undertaking fieldwork aren't readily applicable. He convincingly advocates for an interdependence of oral and written sources, and in his chapter undertakes, quote, charting a counter-history in which the historiographic schism between history and ethnography has been challenged and bridged. Some musicologists focus on one of two things. They either undertake meticulous case studies, like unearthing primary sources and making them available, yet don't necessarily develop new conceptual or methodological approaches. Or they operate mainly at a meta level, reflecting on the state of the discipline, and God knows there's a lot of navel-gazing going on in musicology, discussing methodological issues, yet not doing much work at the coalface, as it were. Phil Bohlman is a rare example of someone covering both of these sides. A look at some of his books and the titles demonstrates the range and depth of his scholarship. And despite regularly warning my students against it, I'm now about to refer to a list of his titles featuring in Wikipedia. But then this is not an academic text. Also, the Wikipedia list is the longest I found, longer than the one on his own Chicago staff page. It contains 28 monographs and edited volumes in English and German, yet it still had a partial list of books. The list contains titles that have become classics, such as World Music, A Very Short Introduction, or Discipline in Music, Musicology and Its Canons. He has edited the Cambridge History of World Music, Comparative Musicology and Anthropology of Music, Essays on the History of Ethnomusicology, as well as Jazz World's World Jazz. His interest in nationalism is reflected in titles such as Song Loves the Masses, Herder und Music and Nationalism, and Focus, Music, Nationalism and the Making of the New Europe. The religious aspect of music is covered by titles such as Revival and Reconciliation, Sacred Music in the Making of European Modernity, or Music in American Religious Experience, and Enchanting Powers, Music in the World's Religions. Issues of race and identity feature in Music and the Racial Imagination, or Land Without Nightingales, Music in the Making of German America. Jewish musical traditions are the topic of books such as The Folk Songs of Ashkenaz, Jewish Music and Modernity, and Jewish Musical Modernism, Old and New. Other regions are covered by titles such as Balkan Epic, Song, History, Modernity, or Celtic Modern, Music at the Global Fringe, or Sounding Cities, Auditory Transformations in Berlin, Chicago, and Kolkata. He also has some publications on art music, including Hans Eisler in Der Musik ist es anders, or It's Different in Music, written together with his daughter Andrea, and Heiner Müller and Heiner Goebbels' Wolokolamska Chaussee, about a composition from 1989-90. Some of our master students this year are in the room with us. A few weeks ago, we discussed the ideas of the Canadian singer and musicologist Dylan Palmer, who argues that a good musicologist also should be, even has to be, a good practicing musician. On that count, I would be out, yet not Phil Bohlman. Alongside his scholarly work, he also has a practical side. He is the founder and artistic director of the New Budapest Orpheum Society, a cabaret group particularly engaging with Central European Jewish heritage. He acts as dramatic speaker on several of their recordings. There are altogether 4 CDs, which have added to his list of awards. Alongside the University of Oxford's Donald Tovey Prize, they also earned him the Noah Greenberg Award from the American Musicological Society. By the way, I earlier mentioned the list from Wikipedia, 28 books. I also found another one with actually 37 entries, but that's not just books, that includes recordings and some other things. So that is possibly the top longest list I found, combining academic and creative output. Alongside his creative achievements, Bohlman's scholarly work has also received many prizes, awards, and honors, of which I can only name a few here. In 1997, he was awarded the Edward J. Dent Medal from the Royal Musical Society, the first ethnomusicologist to receive it. In 2003, the American Academy in Berlin presented him with their Berlin Prize, while in 2007, the British Academy bestowed him with its Derek Allen Prize. Perhaps among his most outstanding awards is the 2022 Balzan Prize. The Balzan Prize is awarded to 4 academics and artists per year, yet since its inception in 1961, the recipients have included no more than 2 composers and 3 musicologists, although I'm sort of obliged to say Judge Ligeti is one of them. Bohlman was the first music scholar to receive it since 2012 and is, yet again, the only ethnomusicologist among its winners. Bohlman has contributed to the development of our discipline through more than just his scholarship, teaching, and creativity. He has been editor of the International Musicological Society's journal Acta Musicologica, as well as series editor of Chicago Studies in Ethnomusicology, Big Issues in Music, European Ethnomusicologies and Modernities, and recent researches in the oral traditions of music. He's a member or corresponding member of several national academies of arts or arts and sciences, including in the US and Britain. He has been awarded honorary doctorates and held visiting professorships in many countries. Yet there's one more reason to award Phil Bohlman the Research Ireland Harrison Medal tonight. That is because a central though as yet unmentioned attribute of his is his love of Ireland and his regular visits to our shores. He has long-standing relationships with many Irish people and institutions. In 2003, he gave a keynote at the 2nd Conference on Irish Traditional Music at the University of Ulster in Derry. And I already mentioned the resulting volume, Celtic Modern, Music at the Global Fringe. In 2007, he keynoted again, if that's a verb, I'm never quite sure, at the annual ICTM Ireland Conference in Cork. That was before they acquired the D to their name. And in 2020, he did the same at the SMI ICTM Ireland Postgraduate Conference in Limerick. That one can still be watched on YouTube. He has acted as an external PhD or program examiner at the University of Limerick, UCC, and UCD, and has presented UCD's Larche Memorial Lecture in 2012. Several friends and colleagues supervised or examined by him are here in the room with us. 2 years ago, I was flying out to the US and unexpectedly ran into him after one of his recent visits to Ireland as we were waiting for the same plane to Chicago. By the way, there's no other musicologist I've run into accidentally in different countries that often, indicating some sort of omnipresence on his part. Let me close by thanking the people who made our gathering here possible. Patrick Gagan and the Long Room Hub, Nicole Grimes and the Department of Music, as well as Tarja Aaron, Ireland's new academic innovation and funding agency. It is today represented by Dr. Gráinne Walsh, Assistant Director, Research and Development, and we are most grateful that Tarja Aaron has agreed to continue the collaboration we had with the Irish Research Council, one of its predecessors. Yet I'm most grateful to Phil for agreeing to accept this award, come over from Chicago, and join us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Wolfgang, for that beautiful citation. I'd now like to hand over to Dr. Gráinne Walsh, who, as we've heard, is the Assistant Director of Research and Development to Research Ireland. So very welcome.
Thank you all. It's a real privilege to join you here today on behalf of Tarja Aaron. I was asked how to pronounce it, and I think that's how you do it. But Research Ireland, in any case, to celebrate one of the most distinguished honours in Irish musicology, the Harrison Medal. And I'll start with some thank yous, which are to our hosts and organisers, Patrick Gagan, Nicole Grimes, Hannah Millington, and especially to SMI President Wolfgang Marx for the kind welcome and invitation to be here on this august occasion. I also want to thank your man on the ground in Research Ireland, Cillian O'Kelly, our resident musicologist and programme manager, who has organised Research Ireland's continued participation in the Harrison Medal. So it's always good to have a champion, and he is the champion of the musicology community in Ireland, within Research Ireland. But I can say that it's a little bit in the DNA of Research Ireland, because we bring it with us from the IRC, our support for and desire to continue to ensure that there is recognition of the importance of supporting research across the arts and humanities, and especially, of course, in musicology, as we're here to celebrate tonight. So this award represents the highest recognition from the Society for Musicology in Ireland, and it honours exceptional scholarship and lifelong contributions in the field. And it's a testament to the depth and diversity of musicology research that enriches our cultural and academic life. The Irish Research Council has supported this medal since 2018, and now Research Ireland has been very proud to partner with SMI to support this award. And past recipients, of course, have included Professor Jim Sampson in 2018, Professor Michael Beckerman in 2021, and most recently, Dr. Ita Bosang in 2022. And I was delighted to be able to present the medal on that occasion, and very sad subsequently that Ita is no longer with us. But today, it is my great honour to congratulate Professor Philip Bohlman, our 2025 Harrison Medal recipient. And I think I need say no more than Wolfgang has already said, but I do need to say that your work has profoundly shaped our understanding of music and cultural identity, exploring spaces between music, religion, nationalism, and cabaret. I love that. I really love that. Your scholarship exemplifies the global reach and impact of musicological research. And in research funding these days, we hear about impact all the time. And I think your life's work exemplifies how important musicological research is for us all in society as human beings. And we are delighted to see your celebrations celebrated here today. So in closing, I just want to say that Research Ireland is committed to continuing this partnership as part of our mission to support world-class research across all disciplines. So congratulations once again to Professor Bohlman on this well-deserved recognition, and thank you to the Society of Musicology in Ireland for your ongoing collaboration with us in Research Ireland and giving us the opportunity to be part of occasions like this. This is absolutely the nicest part of my job. Thank you.
And it now gives me very great pleasure, sorry, you've literally just sat down, to welcome to our virtual stage today Professor Philip Bohlman to deliver the 2025 Harrison lecture entitled On Goodness. So you're very, very warmly welcome, Professor Bohlman.
I could spend the time allotted me simply to thank everyone. So many people have been thanked already this evening that I want to say that I echo those thanks. Those thanks mean a great deal to me. And I won't name everyone because they've been named already, but I hold all of you in my heart with thanks. And I want to say that my thanks also result from the many years in which I've had occasion to come to Ireland, to visit friends, and to have students here, to meet all of you, to learn from you, and to return always. Return will be very much a part of what I speak about this evening. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. There are so many ways in which it is for me an enormous honor to receive the Harrison Medal from the Society for Musicology in Ireland that I cannot possibly name them all this evening.
I'm forced by time to mention only a few, and so I've decided to limit myself to what I might describe as the dovetailing of the biographical and the autobiographical. As I prepared for this evening's Harrison Medal ceremony over the past several months, I increasingly recognized that I was coming full circle in an intellectual engagement with Frank Harrison that had accompanied me throughout my career. When I rerouted my studies as a pianist in the mid-1970s, following a path of music scholarship that has since led me to the times, places, and musics I could hardly have imagined as a youthful postgraduate, two of Frank Harrison's most important contributions to intellectual history awaited me, I should say, welcomed me, as milestones for the journey ahead. The anthology of travel writings, Time, Place, and Music from 1973, and the opening chapters of Musicology, Harrison's American Musicology and the European Tradition, published in 1963. If there ever was an Exhibit A that confirmed the ways these writings engendered what Harry White has called Harrison's radical reinterpretation of the function of musicology, I am that Exhibit A. Those first milestones were not the only ones to guide my own intellectual journey. The vast range of Harrison's research across time and space inspired me to cross cultural and musical borders and to blur boundaries. Like Harrison, I became a passionate translator of past and contemporary writings on musical thought. In my case, the writings on music of Johann Gottfried Herder. There's even a bit of coming full circle in Ireland that bears mention. We stand today in Trinity College, or I guess I'm the only one standing, where Frank Harrison took his academic degrees. The resonance may seem distant, but the first research project I undertook, and from which my earliest publications came as I passed the musicological milestones Frank Harrison had placed before me, that first research was an in-depth study of the musical universe of an Irish-American farmer, Charlie Bannon of Mount Zion, Wisconsin. Not by chance, I've written about and published from that earliest research on numerous occasions, including in Ireland. Perhaps the most important intellectual path that I share with Frank Harrison is the conviction that musicology, all the musicologies, that musicology has agency, that it does something, that its intellectual history is also the history of humanity. Writing about musicology in America, Harrison forcefully describes that agency thus. In the musical life of his own society, the musical historian has a role to play similar to that he fulfills on the wider canvas of the history of the West. To be aware of the roots and branches of his country's musical history, to rewrite them and reinterpret them as an essential contribution to the self-knowledge of his society and as a means to a historical continuity that may carry a living and evolving culture through its periodic crises. End of citation. It is that agency, that power of doing something that lies at the center of my talk this evening. The doing something to which I now turn is that of doing goodness. Part one, on finding goodness. In the autumn 2024 issue of Kosmos, the magazine of the august German research foundation, the Alexander von Humboldt Stiftung, the lead article bears the title, Mr. Titus, How Can Music Save the Climate? The question posed in the title and other questions that follow, such as what links music to plastic waste, suggest both irony and a tongue-in-cheek disbelief about music's ability to act in any real way on the very real climate challenges facing today's world. In the pages of a research magazine for a foundation whose work is overwhelmingly focused on the STEM fields, climate activism growing from music scholarship might seem to many as if it had arrived at the wrong address. What, after all, does music really do? Mr. Titus, Professor Olusegun Stephen Titus of Obafemi Awolowo University in Nigeria, hesitated not the least to provide answers to and to back them up with his career of acting with music to achieve goodness in his field of musicology. Music penetrates our subconscious. If you repeatedly sing a song that thematizes environmental pollution, corruption, or other social problems, it gets firmly fixed in your mind and changes your attitude. Music cements problems and injustices in one's memory and thus helps to generate political pressure. End of this citation from Cosmos. I begin epigrammatically this evening with the important lesson I find in Professor Titus's claims for music and music scholarship, their capacity to do good in the world. Part 2, on doing good. Two paths have led me to my reflections this evening on music scholarship's moral purpose. The first is broadly philosophical, and it has grown from my own long engagement with different strands of philosophy, especially those I would group together as moral philosophy. You will already have recognized my debt to the essays of Montaigne. A further indebtedness to David Hume's A Treatise on Human Nature is also clearly evident. Moral philosophy also provides me an historical thread, drawing diverse ethical and aesthetic works into global conversation. Among the philosophical works that most influence my reflections are Aristotle's writings on ethics, especially the Nicomachean Ethics and Magna Moralia, the Sanskrit Natya Shastra, Boethius's De Institutione Musica, and the political aesthetic writings of Al-Farabi and Ibn Khaldun. Critically for this historical scope of music scholarship that Frank Harrison would envision is that the engagement with the ethical dimensions of aesthetics has globally expanded and varied in modern studies in moral philosophy. Important for me, and I believe for music scholarship's commitment to moral purpose, is that the diverse approaches to moral philosophy share a common concern with the purpose of aesthetics for lived-in worlds. The question of the soul is critical to each. The question of the soul has drawn me to search for the longue durée of moral purpose in modern philosophical writing. It will surprise few this evening when I follow a path through the thought of Johann Gottfried Herder, whose writings I have for decades been translating into English. Finally, the form and substance of this talk owe an enormous debt to W.E.B. Du Bois's The Souls of Black Folk. For me, one of the most powerful and profound modern treatises on moral philosophy. With these paths now charted, I turn to their convergence in our common moral purpose of doing good. The underpinnings of music studies in moral philosophy are perhaps the most fundamental in the agency of music scholars to motivate their field to do good. Goodness may seem to be an elusive, at the very least subjective quality, but for moral philosophy, its implementation, the actual doing of good, is rarely easy. Situated among the most complex virtues afforded moral purpose, goodness is possible only when those who would seek it abandon some adherence of selfness to be beneficial to others. Goodness thus does not just happen. The individual must animate it so that it acts upon others to be beneficial for them in the form of the common good for society as a whole. Aristotle, in the Nicomachean Ethics, attributes agency to doing good. He identifies the essential role of agency and action in Book 1, entitled simply The Human Good. If we state this function of humans to be a certain kind of life, and this is to be an activity and actions of the soul implying a rational principle, and the function of a good human to be the good and normal performance of these, and if any action is well performed when it is performed in accordance with the appropriate virtues, if this is the case, human good turns out to be activity of soul exhibiting virtue. End of citation. For Enlightenment philosophers, the action of doing good afforded its utility, efficacy for society. Doing good becomes possible when individuals otherwise separated by differences embrace it as a social contract, summarized by David Hume thus. And though the heart does not always take part with those general notions or regulate its love and hatred by them, yet are they sufficient for discourse and serve all our purposes in company, in the pulpit, on the theater, and in the schools. From these principles, we may easily account for that merit, which is commonly ascribed to generosity, humanity, compassion, gratitude, friendship, fidelity, zeal, disinterestedness, liberality, and all those other qualities which form the character of good and benevolent. End of citation from a treatise on human nature. The concern with doing good is not only the property of philosophy. It unfolds as a pathway to all the arts and humanities. In Percival Everett's marvelous Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, James, a retelling of Mark Twain's The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn from the perspective of Huck's enslaved companion named Jim, Jim explains the doing of good to Huck as an act that follows the knowing of good. I'll not pretend to use the dialect that Jim and Huck use in this passage, but read it more or less with my Midwestern dialect. "Ain't I doing wrong, though?" Huck said. He was troubled. "How am I supposed to know what good is?" Jim responded, "The way I see it is the following. If you have to have a rule to tell you what's good, if you have to have good explained to you, then you can't be good. If you need some kind of God to tell you right from wrong, then you won't ever know." End of citation from James. The dual emphasis on utility, doing good, and social contract, common good, establishes the kinship of moral philosophy to our fields of music scholarship. The connectedness of doing good to common good further extends the kinship to the historical longue durée of musical scholarship and its engagement with the times and places in which doing good musically has contributed substantially to the sustenance of survival. The accounts gathered by Frank Harrison in Time, Place, and Music surely bear witness to that quality of goodness. In their commitment to doing good, music scholars, moreover, have moved their research and activism to the sites of cultural fragility and endangered peoples, among the most critical, to the borderlands that migrants must cross in order to survive, in order to find goodness. It is through my ethnomusicological work as a performer, as the artistic director of the cabaret ensemble, the New Budapest Orpheum Society, that I follow music through the space of trauma and survival arising from genocide. Here you see my group, my troupe, my ensemble, as we were on a tour through the UK a few years ago. How remarkable and how ironic it is to realize that cabaret and other forms of music and theater performed on the cabaret stage found homes in the concentration camps and ghettos of the Shoah. At the sites of enormous suffering and trauma, there are stages in which diverse forms of entertainment took place, some lighthearted, some profoundly serious, most a mixture from both. The differences between one camp or ghetto and others were enormous. As many as 9 cabarets were active in Theresienstadt, whereas the musical life of prisoners in Auschwitz at many moments only barely survived, as we know from accounts about the women's orchestra. Traces from the performances on such stages do survive, but surviving evidence only complicates the ways in which we understand the irony of the confluence of music and trauma at the moment of survival, the conclusion of which can only be forestalled through performance. This is from the current project of my ensemble, which we call the Babylon Project. This is a poster of a recent program we did on exile. We've now recorded these CDs and they're in post-production, I'm happy to report. At the moment of survival, music responds to trauma, striving to hold on to that which is most precious in the past, transforming it into the afterlife of memory through performance. Musically, as we witness in the traces of performance from the Shoah, music performed at the site of trauma has neither authentic beginning nor final ending. The musician plays in order to play again. The actor learns her lines in order once again to take to the stage. If it is silence that lies beyond the end, singing the final verse in the final skit provides no viable option. The music of trauma contains no other option than beginning anew where one left off. The cabaret stage becomes a metaphorical space of mirrors, the sounding and resounding of reprise and refrain. The metaphorical mirror also refracts the ways in which nothing is really what it seems to be. The world of the cabaret thus engenders parody, and it creates the illusion that allows the audience to believe there is a path to enter alternative worlds. Those of you who might know the great opera from the concentration camps, Victor Ullmann's Der Kaiser von Atlantis, will remember that the figure of death, the character of death, enters on the stage through a mirror and exits through a mirror. That's the portal that death takes to the stage. The moments of performance in the Shoah reveal trauma, too, is distorted through the mirror of the cabaret stage. Performance assumes many forms, suggesting alternative journeys through life, embedding each of these in music. Entering the lived-in world of trauma, the safe space of performance becomes a precarious moment in which inside and outside are inverted. In that moment, self becomes other becomes self. The world on the stage is made to appear as if it were every day, albeit with reflections and shadows that change the ways we perceive it. The cabaret is itself an intimate space where the self and other explore their intimacy through the interplay of darkness and light, that which is hidden and that which is revealed. Revelation and reflection thus become one, when performance, in our case of cabaret, becomes the mirror through which the spectator and listener enter the moment in which we see ourselves as others. Please join me, if for a moment, as I sound such passage with the close of a cabaret potpourri from the Literarisches Straußbrettel in the concentration camp at Theresienstadt. This is a work called a potpourri, called Aus der Familie der Sträuße, from the family of the Strausses. It was written by Leo Strauss, who was one of the greatest of the cabaret actors and performers in Central Europe, the son of Oskar Strauss, the composer of operetta, and also Oskar Strauss, of course, worked with Arnold Schoenberg in Berlin when Schoenberg was a cabaret player. This Leo Strauss, unfortunately, did not survive, but was killed in Auschwitz. So this is the final of these pieces from the family of the Strausses. Playing with me at this time was Ida Levinson, my colleague in the New Budapest Orpheum Society. Part 4, on the return to life. It is at the confluence of music and poetry that I search for the path that returns to life, to the soteriological realization of goodness. Though the implications of soteriology are religious, it is a critical concept of the relation of life to death in many worlds, the Abrahamic faiths and the world religions of Buddhism and Hinduism among them. The rhythm and meter of poetry open a sense of time. The melodic path of music affords a sense of place. Music leads toward the moment of memory that makes transcendence possible. It is in this sense that I employ it to understand the possibilities that follow the trauma of the Shoah in my research and work as a performer. The songs and poetry from the Shoah intone the temporal beginning and ending that formed an aesthetic of journey and tragedy through Jewish music, from the rise of modernity in the Jewish Enlightenment, the Haskalah, through the era of fascism and the Shoah. The aesthetic with which I concern myself here is that of goodness, dislodged from time and place, suspended between eschatological and soteriological moments, the end of things and the return to life. It is an aesthetic that depends on time itself, the paradox of sustaining time to allow music to move beyond the tragic ending. It is an aesthetic of searching for, but not finding, the moment of memory upon which it depends. How, we ask, at the moment of death and sacrifice in the Shoah, is goodness sounded? I offer not an answer to that question, rather a moment from one composer's life and death. Victor Ullmann, born in 1898, he died in Auschwitz in 1944, in which Ullmann sought finality in the materials available to him in the concentration camp at Theresienstadt. Again, I seek to realize the soteriological moment of goodness in the music of the Shoah performatively, opening further dimensions of the ways in which music and journey converge. In his attempt to complete the melodrama Die Weise von Liebe und Tod des Kornetts Christoph Rilke, the chronicle of love and death of the flag bearer Christoph Rilke, Ullmann embarked upon a process of composing the end of life and the end of history, a moment that Christine Wilkie-Bohlman and I capture in our performances and recordings of Ullmann's Die Weise. And I'll play just the beginning of one of these, of a recording that we did. This isn't really a recording, it was something we did during the pandemic, when the only opportunity he had was with video. And I played just the first scene and part of the second scene, so you have the ideas of journey, but also the return to life that we see even at the beginning of this wonderful melodrama. The texts, poetry, and music from the Shoah that I weave into my reflections this evening represent moments of transit. The texts are about movement, above all, journey in its multiple forms. The performance of the texts enact journey in the soteriological moment. A moment is itself transitory. It begins in order to end, or rather to allow further moments. The moment of trauma gives way to creation. The sacred journey stretches from myth to history. The moment of Holocaust and Shoah is sounded through transcendence and return. The teleology of time resounds the past, but returns to resound as the soteriology of the future. Music, even at moments of utter destruction, retains the traces of its beginnings, and therein lies the very possibility of goodness created when music moves. Part 5, on realizing the unrealized possibilities of musicology. Quite deliberately, I have filled my reflections this evening with metaphors of travel and journey, of paths and milestones, of exile and return, of the passage across borders, of soteriology and coming full circle, of Christoph Rilke writing, writing, writing. I've also deliberately chosen this abundance of metaphors because I believe it would provide a common point of arrival for the two thinkers to whom I have turned most frequently on the discursive journey at which music scholarship and moral philosophy conjoined this evening, Johann Gottfried Herder and Frank Harrison. We too have joined them, I hope, as travel companions, for we too have much in common for the ways in which they sought the goodness of music and history and charged that goodness with agency. For Herder, this was a goodness that he discovered while on his life-changing sea journey in 1769, when he traveled from Riga to Germany and France, eventually to Weimar. Let's listen to Herder for a moment when he writes in his 1769 travel journey about the encounter with the goodness spawned by new ideas. I include here actually his itinerary for that journey, which is in his own hand. As long as the mind or the mirror of the soul remains intimate and tender, is capable of absorbing each new image with complete force, in all colors and nuances, with each truth, experience, and flexibility, we possess the tender and maturing youth of the soul. There is more anxiety in the soul, however, even as it encounters new experiences in a different culture, for it returns also to revisit the old, which is already familiar. End of citation. I too shall return by way of arriving at the close of my journey with you this evening, by way of returning to Trinity College, where Frank Harrison's journeys as a music scholar began. It's only fitting that Frank Harrison be given the final word. And where better to find that final word than in the thoughts with which he closed his reflections on American musicology, to which it was my privilege to return with you this evening. One of the special opportunities of American musicology is to look beyond the cautious fences of recent tradition and to range over the whole of musical culture with the same avid curiosity as did Pretorius or Burney. In these days, besides the sense of history and the experience of the practical and social requirements of music making, the awareness of unrealized possibilities is the most important of the values that musicology should bring to an expanding musical life. Thank you very much.